Hello, I'm Roger Wright, and I'd like to welcome you to another episode of Glory on Grandview, Tales of Grizzly Football. We are back with some new episodes here, and I am really excited about our guest today. Thought we'd kick off season 2 with an extra special guest, and that is Tom Rabatin. Tom is a 1969 graduate of Wadsworth High School. Tom, welcome.
Correct. Thank you. Thank you. It's an honor and a privilege to be here.
And we've got an exciting story to get to here, and it begins really, Tom, with you were a part of some of the greatest teams in Wadsworth School history here at an exciting time in the late 60s, when, if you watched any of our previous shows, you know that's when Wadsworth football really started to take off and get really good. Tom, you're one of the key members of those teams there. So we want to talk and start off just a little bit about growing up in Wadsworth, Ohio. And like a lot of our Grizzlies, you talked about it all began with youth football.
Yes, it did, actually. And I think there's an easy correlation between the creation of Pee Wee football and then Bantam football and the success that Wadsworth teams had, because when you start early like that and you learn fundamentals and you learn to love the game and the techniques and so on, that just carries right on through high school and into college even.
All right, well, it certainly carried on with your teams, because in 1966 and 1967, you were a sophomore. Yeah. The head coach was none other than our friend Dick Hunter.
That's right.
Who we've done a neat episode on Glory on Grandview on Coach Hunter.
Yes.
But really a neat guy and a very talented coach. So talk a little bit about that 66-67 season with Coach Hunter.
Well, you're absolutely correct in that Coach Hunter was he was quite a coach. A lot of coaches rely on technique. A lot of coaches rely on personality, but Coach Hunter had both. I mean, he had a vast knowledge of the game, but he was also a great motivator. And if you weren't doing things as he would have you do them, he could blister your ears a little bit.
I think you said he could peel the paint off the walls in the locker room with some of his colorful language and animated behavior.
But you had to like him. He was a player's coach. He didn't mince words, and I think he motivated us in a way that a lot of us weren't used to, but it was very effective.
And that was Coach Hunter's second year. The previous year, guys kind of took their lumps, but then by that time,
that's right.
Boy, they took off. And take off is an understatement, because they went 10-0. I mean, you guys had a defense you called the Untouchables.
20 points. They gave up 20 points all year.
So average 2 points, giving up 2 points a game. Yeah. So the Untouchables were pretty untouchable there.
Right.
And you went on to a 10-0 season. So you had a great sophomore season. Coach Hunter exited. He was very talented. You've heard the old expression, you can't keep talent down, and you couldn't.
That's right.
So he connected with his old contact from Barberton, Bo Schembeckler, and off they went to Miami of Ohio, and then they ended up with the team up north there at the University of Michigan. On to success there. So you have this great season, 10-0. The whole town was probably going crazy at the success, and then a new coach steps in, and that's none other than our friend Laurel Mast. So talk a little bit about Coach Mast and the next season, high expectations.
Coach Mast was a coach that relied a lot on the basics of football. He didn't get real fancy. He believed that blocking, tackling, covering the ball, carrying out your assignments was the way to win ball games, and he was correct. When we were on offense, it's kind of funny. We had 2 quarterbacks while I was there. We had Ronnie Bayduk, who he is my friend. I have to kid about him a little bit. He had these skinny little legs. And I kid him about that all the time. He got arrested for vagrancy once. No visible means of support. But then after he played quarterback, we had Bill Kish. And I guess it's a tradition in football that quarterbacks can't play other positions, but Bill would have been a great linebacker. He was mean. No offense to Coach Mast, but Bill, I believe, was the better passer of the two, and Coach Mast believed in run the football. So Bill didn't get as many opportunities, but nonetheless, we were successful. Coach Mast, to this very day, I respect and love him. He was an example, a great example, not only as a coach, but as a man. So I'm glad he's still around with us, and I like to see him and talk to him from time to time. But we were blessed to have him.
And I know in talking to him, because we did a show with Laurel as well.
Yeah,
and
I saw it.
No, talking to him, there was a lot of pressure. You know, your first year they went 10-0 with popular Dick Hunter. You know, the flamboyant and charismatic Dick Hunter, and then here's Laurel coming in, and you guys did nothing but go 10-0 again under Laurel Mast. So 10-0, 10-0.
I think I mentioned to you about another difference between those two. When Coach Hunter was angry, he could blister you with his verbiage. Coach Mast, when you knew he was really upset, he used the word shingle nails. So if he started out with shingle nails, you knew he was angry and upset about things, but that didn't happen very often, fortunately.
Yeah, quite different styles. So
yeah.
I know this is cool. One of the things you had was a neat program from your senior year. So I know we got some pictures. We'll show you some of the pictures from the program. There's the squad there you could see, and you mentioned your coaches. We got a shot of Coach Mast and his group there. There's some of the assistants, and that's something you always talk about, Tom. The times we've talked, you always mention your coaches and how good they were. And then there's an action shot. There's a young Tom Rabatin, number 70 in your program, number 1 in your heart. But there he is, hard charging, coming across the field. But your senior season, so you go 10-0, and now you're coming to your senior season. Everybody had to have you guys hyped up and a team to beat. You had a target on your back.
Yes, we did.
Your senior season.
Yeah.
Talk about what happened there.
The first or second game of the season, we played Coventry, and it was the first and only time in my life that I've heard a coach that his team lost the game 90-14, and he thanked Coach Mast for not running up the score. So we had some offensive power, and I believe he was our fourth team quarterback. Sid Bennett scored 4 touchdowns in that game, so it kind of gives you an indication of where we were going. Our first 4 games, first 3 games, 4 games, we won, and then we went down to face Orville and stick the Riders.
There it is. They had those all over Wadsworth High School that week.
Stick the Riders and beat Orville. We had these everywhere. We put them on our lockers. We put them on our closets at home. Everywhere it was stick the Riders. And that was one of the most incredible games that I've ever played insofar as fluke occurrences. Right before the half, Denny Beam, a great player on Wadsworth teams and a great baseball player, it was a Hail Mary pass right before the half, and it was launched. The ball was thrown into the end zone. Beam was there and covered it, knocked the ball up in the air, and what happens? It falls right on the Orville receiver. Later in the game, 4 different times, we're inside the 10-yard line driving in to score, and we had 4 fumbles and lost every one of them. So we lost the ball game.
And that was the only loss in 3 years.
Only loss in 3 years.
As a Wadsworth Grizzly. And boy, I remember when I first started coaching, that rivalry with Orville was real, and you could tell, boy, those two communities love to play each other.
Yeah.
And but so anyway, so you had a great career, and then you were a 3-sport athlete as well. You were on the wrestling team with a record of 18-1 then.
Yes.
So you at a time when Wadsworth wrestling was not quite the Wadsworth wrestling it became one day under Coach G. But
19 matches in a season, as opposed to, I think some of the wrestlers today for Wadsworth get 19 matches in a week.
Yeah, so, quite different. But you were good. You were a successful wrestler, and then you're also in track and field. So, and I know one of the neat things you told me. So you were 210 pounds.
Yeah, 215. Yes,
215, and you set the school high jump record.
That's correct.
So what was the? Do you remember what you jumped there?
5'11 3/4.
So I mean that speaks volumes to your athleticism there, but track athlete as well. So you had the success of the teams. You had come from great coaching. You had supportive parents and a great community, and then the recruiting process began for you, and that was interesting. You said one day at practice you looked over and there was a young man in big glasses, Joe Paterno, was over watching practice.
We had no idea who he was, no idea whatsoever, because he was relatively new at Penn State. And afterwards, Coach Mast asked me if I realized who that was, and of course I didn't. And I am being 100% sincere when I say this. I had no idea anybody was recruiting me or even looking at me. It just never occurred to me that people may want me to play football after high school. And one thing about him, and I know he ran into trouble later in his career, but he wrote the most eloquent letter to me about my post-high school career. And the letter was a page and a half, and in the last 2 sentences, he talked about football. The rest of the letter was all about talking about enjoying my days in high school that remained, and enjoying college, whatever college I chose, the virtues of going to Penn State, and so on. So I liked him, even though I didn't go there.
So you thought about that one, and then you had your old coach, Dick Hunter, who now was on his way to Ann Arbor and saying, Tom, we'd love you to come up here and be a Wolverine with Coach Schembeckler. And you loved Coach Hunter. You said it was tempting.
I did.
You said it was tempting.
Oh, that was one of the hardest things I've ever done, is to say no to him. And I've never really talked to him about it. It was probably just business to him. But to me, it was difficult because I really, really liked him as a person and as a coach. And I liked Schembeckler. Schembeckler was a version of Woody. And it was a difficult decision. It really was. And it came down to those two.
All right. Well, the other half of those two was our beloved Ohio State Buckeyes.
That's right.
We got a great picture here of you and Woody Hayes. So Woody came calling, and I like that. I talked to you about it. You said, Woody, when he came to our house, he didn't really talk to me.
Didn't talk to me at all. He
talked to my parents, and he said, especially your mom.
Yeah.
So Woody came and talk about a little bit about that. Woody the recruiter.
Woody the recruiter worked on your family, and other coaches came and promised this and promised that and so on. And Woody, when he addressed my parents and my little sister, Bonnie, he worked on her real hard. My other sisters liked him and so on. But when he talked to my parents, he emphasized education, a clean program, a fair chance to play. And he sold my parents. And although they never came out and said, Tom, we want you to go to Ohio State, or we wish you would, or so on, when I made that decision, I know it made them very, very happy. And that made me happy. And I've never regretted that.
And you had a neat story. You said when you, because Woody knew it was between Michigan and Ohio
Yeah.
State, and he said he took you out to the High Life Steakhouse in Columbus.
Right.
And talk a little bit. I thought that was neat. That was
Yeah.
kind of a neat story there.
He invited me to come down to a basketball game, and he said, "Tom, bring one of your friends." Well, for what it seems to me that at the time, my available buddies were all taken except Terry taken. And I took him with me, and we went to the basketball game, and then afterwards we were at the High Lie. And Coach was chit-chatting, and then he got very serious, and he said, "Tom, have you made up your mind as to which school you're going to go to?" And I said, "Yes, Coach, I have." He said, "Are you coming to Ohio State?" I said, "Yes, Coach, I am." And he said, "Really? So you're coming to Ohio State to play football?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Hold on a minute." So he stood up and tapped his glass, and he said, "Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to introduce to you the newest Ohio State Buckeye, Tom Rabatin." And everybody stood up and cheered and clapped, and, of course, I was blushing. but that was really, really neat. And then afterwards, he sat down and he got very serious. And he said, "Terry, you're a witness to this. I want you to be a witness to this. So pay attention." And then he looked at me and he said, "Tom," he said, "we're taking a chance on each other." He said, "But here's my promise to you. From this point forward, you have your scholarship. Even if you were injured in a car wreck on the way home, I'm telling you, you have your scholarship. And Terry, you're a witness to this." And at the time, I thought, well, okay, that's great. But later on, I met a lot of guys on recruiting trips. And some of them went to schools where when they got injured and couldn't play, they took their scholarships. And that was apparently legal back then. And I'll never forget that Woody made that promise to me. And later on, when I got hurt and couldn't play, he lived up to it. I never had to worry about losing my scholarship.
So let's talk about that. So the fall then of 1970, you show up on the campus of Ohio State, the Ohio State University,
Yeah.
freshman, great teams. I mean, that was at a time when they had won several national championships.
Right.
They were one of the dominant teams in college football. You were going to play on a national championship team in 1970. You were on the freshman squad, and you had some great players that you played with that fall there in Columbus.
Just to correct that, the '69 season was my freshman year.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I
Yeah,
said 70. Sorry.
the
Yeah.
76 freshmen weren't eligible. We had
Yes.
our own. All we were practice dummies, which was good because we played against the number one team in the country. Anyway, yeah.
So some of the players on that 69 team, Jack Tatum.
Jack Tatum.
Some of the names are just legendary. Rex Kern.
Yeah. We had the trio from Kent Roosevelt. We had Tom DeLone, Campana, and Stan White, who I believe all went on to play professional football either in the United States or in Canada. Jim Stillwagon was our nose guard.
All-American.
Yeah.
There's a picture of the team there. Nice team picture.
Oh, yeah. That's Rex and Stillwagon and Mace right there in the middle. Jan White, Doug Adams, Phil Strickland. Yeah.
So
I'm up in row.
Those were the dudes you were practicing against.
Yeah.
And you said on the scout team, I love this. You said that they didn't have enough freshman cornerbacks. So at times they would even put you in a defensive back. Again, I think that speaks to your athleticism. If you were playing defensive back, on the scout team there against the national champions, that says something.
We that was in my freshman year. We got the linebackers together because in our recruiting class, for whatever reason, we didn't get enough defensive backs, and he lined up the linebackers and we raced. And I was the fastest, so I got to be the cornerback.
That's how you got elected.
Yeah.
You moved into the defensive backfield for practice.
Yeah, so that was interesting. Although it taught me a lot about coverage and about football in general.
That's right. So this was a national championship team that you were with. So I want you to hold up the plate there, the Rose Bowl plate. This is a kind of a item you had of memorabilia, a neat Rose Bowl plate there, Big Ten champs, 1970.
Yeah.
And then you got your ring, if you want to hold that ring up.
And they made this plate before the championship was announced. And at that time, actually, there were several. There were at least 2 different organizations that voted on national championships. And
there's the ring.
Then,
there it is.
Yeah, I got this. Actually, these just came out a couple years ago. And it was because guys like Rex, because we got Big Ten champion rings. And they thought, okay, well, at the time, that's enough, And then later on, when everybody started getting rings for everything, Rex went to our athletic director and said, hey, how about a ring for a national championship? So here it is.
Well,
yeah.
So talk a little bit then. So you went through that season. It was your time now. You weren't a freshman anymore. The next season came.
Yeah.
And then you had alluded to there was a career-ending injury here. But talk about the start of the season and how you felt going in there, and then what happened with the injury.
Well, there were very high expectations because a lot of this crew was still there. I mean, they were seniors, and there were great expectations for the team, and I was vying for a spot. I had made the kickoff team, so I knew I was traveling, and was competing for playing time at linebacker. So we're playing, and I made a tackle. I got up, and I was supposed to call the defense. So I'm kind of walking around, and my good friend Rick Seifert was our safety, and I'm looking in the stands, looking at the people, and walking around. He said, Tom, call the defense. So I'm looking at different things, and he said, Tom, get in the huddle, call the defense. And I said, Rick, why are we dressed like this? And so that was an automatic timeout. And then they started asking me questions about, where are you? Do you know this? And to give a little background on that, I got my first known concussion as a sophomore here at Wadsworth. And we didn't have any protocol. We didn't know how to deal with concussions back in those days. So the first concussion was at summer practice. The second one was against Orville. I went down on a kickoff and had no clue where I was. Well, that was on a Friday night. I was a sophomore, and the next morning I played in a JV game. That would never happen today.
No.
And in fact, I got a few other concussions at different times through my career at Wadsworth, and to be candid about it, I'm not sure that I would have gotten scholarships had people known then what they know now about concussions.
Right. So you said that was it then. I mean, you knew that, and they told you, right? And
right.
And you said you went to Woody and at one point and said, Coach, I got to play. I can't be done with football, And then he kept your scholarship just as he promised, and he brought you in as a member of the coaching staff, kept you part of the team. But I love what you said, because he knew what you were thinking. I'm going to transfer to another school and play somewhere else. And what did Woody tell you?
Well, I went to him in the spring, and I said, Coach, I can't stand this. I need to play. Please move me to guard, because half the schools that recruited me wanted me to play offensive line, which is unheard of today because the offensive lines are so big, and And he said, no, Tom, I couldn't live with myself if something happened. What if there's an interception and you go for a tackle? He said, and then he looked at me and he started glaring at me, and he said, and started waving his finger, and he said, and I know what you're thinking. And if you try to transfer, I will block you no matter where you go, and I'm doing it for your own good. And he was absolutely correct. Mm-hmm. But I don't know if it had been a different coach and a different set of circumstances if I would have ever played again. But I know Woody did the best thing for me.
All right. Well, you talk a lot about Woody, and we got some pictures of Woody.
Yeah.
We all know, he had his moments, of his, the tyrannical temper and ripping hats up and throwing his glasses and yard markers and everything else. But you also talk about what a student he was of the game, how much effort. You said there were days that he would just live at the Woody Hayes.
He'd sleep on the couch.
Woody Hayes. It was, he would just be at the coach's office for days on end watching film.
Woody was the biggest dichotomy in a man that I've ever met in my life. He was obsessed with football, and there were times when he lost his temper and got carried away and so on. But at the same time, the other half of Woody would help anybody on earth, no matter who they were, football player, athlete, person on the street, under one condition. He had to believe that they were doing everything they could do to help themselves. And he was a man of considerable influence. He could have been governor of Ohio had he wanted to.
Well, one of the people he influenced was a young Tom Rabatin, and I know after football, it killed you not to play, but you went on. You yourself coached youth football for 24 years.
I did.
You talked about paying forward. That Woody, that Ohio State mantra, pay forward, and went on to youth coaching, a successful career in business.
Yeah.
So proud of your son that played football at Louisville, and
I'm very proud of my son.
And coming back to Wadsworth, and now you're a Grizzly football fan.
Right.
Member of the Gridiron Club, Football Alumni Club.
Yep.
And you say you love those Friday nights. So.
And speaking of Friday nights, I have to say this: I am so impressed with Coach Todd. His dedication and knowledge of the game and approach to the game and approach to the players is phenomenal. And I just hope Wadsworth can keep him for a long time.
Well, I'm with you on that. So, Tom, unfortunately, we were out of time, but so happy to have you. Appreciate you coming here.
My pleasure.
Sharing your story with me. I so enjoyed talking to you and getting to meet you, and I hope our viewers will like this as well. So we will be back with future episodes of Glory on Grandview, Tales of Grizzly Football. Thank you.
Yep.
You are watching WCTV, Wadsworth Community Television.